Have you ever felt like you just lost momentum on a project, the nerve to take a risk or give any more energy towards something? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods talking about how we can overcome life's biggest issues one small step at a time. If you've ever been like me, you were sure that you were going to finish a project. You're excited about finishing a project. I get excited about projects all the time. I am a big starter and I am a terrible finisher. Part of it has to do with ADHD, and then part of it just has to do with me just being a human being. And, the excitement fades. Maybe you started to second guess yourself. I second guess myself all the time. And one day you're on fire, and the next day you're staring at this project going, what made me think I could even do this? Losing momentum is normal. Losing courage is normal. Losing oomph, for a little bit, normal. But staying stuck doesn't have to be. This is really what separates the people who get things done in life and the people who are just kind of not getting what they really want out of life because they don't have that urge, that oomph to restart. Momentum really doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. And it erodes for a number of reasons. And at the same time, it erodes, friction in the project is growing. And so maybe it is that your brain got tired. You lost enthusiasm. Momentum is partial enthusiasm. It's partially bandwidth. How much time, money, resources do I have to do this particular project? But sometimes it's also the executive function. The executive function is what typically gets messed up in people with ADHD. I always think of the executive function as you own a business and you have an office manager who sits up at the front of the office, making sure that the bills get paid, that everything coming in gets organized, everything going out gets organized and done correctly. And the executive function at the brain is just goofed up. That tends to be a lot of what my problem is. But even if you don't have that, that happens as well to all of us a little bit. And then the project begins to feel harder. The initial motivation starts to die. And without any structure in place or a plan to go forward, the fuel to just finish this project is done with. There's a psychological term that people call ego depletion. And the idea is that that willpower tires like a muscle, that you eventually lose, your oomph to go on. We see that with diets. People start off in diets very well, and then they just kind of. But new studies are starting to argue that really it has less to do with ego depletion, less to do about energy depletion, and more to do with building friction. Friction is something that will evaporate motivation every time. So think about it this way. I have a heavy box I need to move. I put it on wheels. It's easy to move across my garage. But if it has glue and Velcro at the bottom, and it's now really hard to move across. What we do when we think about friction is we think about, like, let's say going to the gym. I want to go to the gym tonight. I don't know where my exercise clothes are, and I'm not sure where I left my gym shoes. And if I go to the gym, what am I even going to do? I mean, am I going to go on the elliptical? Am I going to lift weights? And if I'm going to lift weights, what weights? This is just too much, right? We start to build up this friction in us, and whatever motivation or urge we had to do something just goes away. Then fear strikes us. Projects feel fun until it really starts to get real. And maybe getting real means getting close to the end. Maybe getting real is you're at a point where you're not really sure what you're going to do. The stakes rise, the costs go up, and fear often masquerades itself as I'm too busy, I'm just not feeling it. Maybe now is just not the right time. A couple of years ago, I spent a couple $1,000s to buy bricks to build a patio. And it went really well. I had to dig a 3-foot ditch. I had to put the gravel in and compact it. That was a lot of work. And it was about 40 tons of gravel. And it was a lot of work where I started to panic and starting to have problems finishing the project was I nearly got to the very end. The walls were built up. The bricks were laid on top of it. And then I needed half bricks. And I thought, I don't really know how to get half bricks. I don't have the machine to make half bricks. So I called a number of companies and said, hey, look, I finished 95% of a patio. Will you come over and just finish the last remaining bits of it? And they're like, no, because, if it falls apart, you blame us. And we don't know what you did right or did wrong. I think they just don't want to make it easy for the people who watch like home repair television shows who get stuck to do that anymore. And so they wouldn't help me out. And I just started to panic about it. And then you realize, well, people are going to come over and they're going to look at it because maybe I'm going to have a barbecue out on my patio. And they're going to be like, ugh, Jill didn't really do a very good job with this. And it came to me at the very end that my fear started being, oh, I'm really busy. I'm really super tired. It's really hard to move 40 tons of gravel and all these bricks around. And, oh, it's kind of hot outside right now. Maybe I'll wait a little bit till it cools off so I feel a little bit better about it. All of that was fear. All of that was fear that I could not finish this project properly. And so then, without a clear path, you lose momentum in that way without that kind of clarity to know what it is. And so it wasn't even about passion. I really had a passion to have a patio. I just lost my oomph because of fear and a number of other things. So oftentimes people don't stop because they're incapable of doing the next step. They stop because they just don't even know what the next step is. And so that lack of clarity harms them. And so we're going to use a framework called Restart to talk about what it is that we need to do in order to get going again. And the R stands for remove the shame. I had a lot of shame around this. I spent a couple $1,000s on bricks and gravel. I worked all summer long doing this. I was just broken because it was a lot of work and it was a lot of physical work when I wasn't really prepared to do it. And I had shame. I had so much shame in this, and my friends would ask me about it, and I'd be embarrassed about it. And that killed my momentum off. It's normal to pause, but restarting requires you to have a little self-kindness. If you keep kicking yourself to the side and to the curb all the time about this, you'll never want to get restarted. And that's a lot of what I was doing. And then studies show that a little bit of self-compassion, just not beating yourself up about everything, increases persistence more than self-discipline. Because you can gut things out for a while, but you can only gut things out so long. There's a person named Kristen Neff, and if you check her research out, she talks a lot about this kind of way of restarting yourself. The E then says, examine the friction. What made continuing so hard? A lot of times it has to do with unclear goals. You don't know what it is you even want to do. The scope of the project was maybe too big. You picked something too large to do. Your fear of judgment. I had a fear of judgment that people were going to come over and see my patio and go, what the heck is this? It actually looked pretty good, but I had a lot of fear of judgment. Exhaustion. Yep, I was physically tired too. Missing a skill. I was missing the ability to cut a brick in half, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, and I didn't know what to do, and I was missing something. And then no feedback loop. This always comes out as being really important because when we feel comfortable in a project, we're capable of bouncing ideas back and forth with people. But when we start getting afraid and we start getting really embarrassed, we don't want to talk to anyone about it. And so now we don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of with anymore because we're just too afraid or too ashamed of doing it. And then perfectionism creeps in. What if this deck or this patio isn't perfect? And I wasted all this time doing it. And so we get a lot of fear with it involved too. So the best thing that you can do in order to get past this is to name the friction. Start listing it out. What is it that is causing it? And how can I reduce this friction piece by piece? If you start identifying what it is that's tying you up. So for me, back these years that I did it, I couldn't really identify what it was that was tiring me out. Was I just tired? Was it really that I was too hot? And now looking back at it, I realized I was just afraid it just wasn't going to be perfect. And if I had sat down and started naming the friction, it would have helped me move on a little bit. And then the next step is, and I'm going to like this one because it's start ridiculously small. Small steps. That's the whole idea about this podcast is start so small you can't possibly fail. If restarting feels like you're climbing a mountain, then just try to create a foothold somewhere in this particular type of project. And so what I started doing in this particular case is I realized, well, let's just finish a corner. Let's just go and finish a corner perfectly, get it perfect. And that had to do initially with lining up the blocks. And then there were these pegs that you dropped in there. Just do that. Just get that in there and then drop the pegs in there and then start working on a tiny corner to get perfect and then start working your way out. Okay, let's try that. If you think about it, like if your project is finding a new job, maybe you started off by slowly rewriting your resume. You started doing a little research and some things that you thought you might like to do for a job theoretically. But now you're at the part where you're actually going to send your resume out to someone. And now you're scared. And now you're afraid. And now you're afraid that you're going to get turned down at the very jobs that you want to have. What's one small step you can do? Could you just get that resume, write your attached application to this company and whatever app you're using, and then you can write it in something else. And so it's all ready to go when you're ready to click send on, uploading your resume into that project. Or if you're trying to write a book, maybe you could just write a paragraph or get your outline and review your outline again. So maybe it's been a little while, you paused on the project, so get yourself familiar with it. But what is one small step that you could take that would just help you? 10 words, write 10 words, set a timer for 5 minutes. Because oftentimes we don't need more discipline. We need to get a spark going. You're trying to just get a little flame going in this project again. And once you do, then it'll start to build upon itself. The T in restart then is to take one brave task, one little micro risk that do the one thing that is making you so afraid of continuing on. And in order to do that, it's going to take a little bit of the defiance of fear. One big, bold move that's going to do it. And that might be, if you're looking for a job, hitting send on your application. If you're trying to write a book, it might be evaluating what it is you're writing and then just go with it, or showing it to somebody else. Show them what you've been writing and get some feedback on it. Something bold that will help you kick back your program to get yourself back on track again. And risks don't have to be heroic. They don't have to be a huge step, but they have to just not be zero. It has to have a little edge to it, a little risk to us here, and then we can feel like we can start to continue again. A then is adjust the expectations. Maybe you thought you were going to write a book by Christmas, and now you're just not going to. It's going to take a little bit longer time for you to do that. Maybe the project was oversized. Maybe your life changed. Maybe you're working a little bit more hours and you just can't commit the amount of time that you were. Sometimes momentum dies because the original version of the project is no longer fitting with the person you are today. So let's shrink the project a little bit. Let's evolve and shift it a little bit. The next R is to refresh with a new reward. Brains need incentives. I hate to say it, but they really do. So you start tracking streaks. You're trying to get back into an exercise program. And so now you're going to put a gold star on a calendar on your refrigerator every time you go exercise for the day. Or maybe you're going to celebrate a micro win with, if I exercise for 30 days in a row, I allow myself at Christmas time to go rent a cabin in the North Woods just to celebrate my win. Or you just you don't buy anything, you don't travel anywhere, but you give yourself a pat on the back and say, good job, Jill. You did it. You got there. Good. Sometimes you just need a change of environment. That helps too. So my patio project, it had to be in my backyard. But if I were trying to write a book, maybe you just need to get away a little bit. Maybe you need that cabin in the woods to just get a fresh start so you can get a fresh brain on it. Or the last one, which is the one that works for me the best, is to get some accountability. You get accountability by someone who's following up with you and making sure you're doing the thing you're meaning to do. That can follow in with like a life coach. I remember there was, I forgot what that app was called. I think it was Coach Me or something like that. And it was basically, I love to tell you that they were all life coaches, but they were all probably just people who were good project managers who kept you accountable to something. So for a while, I had someone who did this, and that worked for me on a project really well because they just checked in with me every other day to see if I was working on a project and making sure I was getting it done. So that just helped quite a bit. Projects fade, and when they become chores, they become less fun. But projects really thrive when they reflect what you are becoming. And so it's possible that if you've been working on a project, they just don't reflect who you are anymore. Or it may be that you really need to get this done. I need a patio. You might need a new job. I'm trying to write this book. But help to reinforce your identity in this. Are you the creator? Are you the helper? Are you the leader? Are you the explorer? What is it exactly is your role in whatever this project is? Some of these projects are so small. I mean, when you're looking for a new job, you kind of have to be almost everything in this new job. But when you're working on something that's a little bit bigger, like when I started doing all these podcasts and that, I had to be the creator and the writer and everything. I started looking at some of the things that I just don't have to really do. There are things in this project where I could not do those things and make it easier on myself because I am not a writer. I'm a good talker. I am someone who's technically capable, who can, get a podcast going. But writing wasn't my skill. How can I relieve that particular type of pressure from me? And so I started to identify who I am in this project and what I'm good at. And that identity will help fuel some perseverance on your part. When you're looking at trying to get your nerve back, when it comes to a project or something that's not going well, like I said, your fear system isn't broken. You've just been in a threat mode too long. The brain, in some really bizarre way, doesn't really identify fear differently, whether it's a physical fear or it's a psychological fear. Think about back in the day, I'm chasing tigers, right? And I have a healthy amount of fear because that tiger could take me out, but it's causing adrenaline to run in me. The modern world, what happens is our body reacts in almost exactly the same way. Our boss comes and yells at us, and our body reacts like we're being chased by a tiger. Adrenaline kicks in, fats and energy flows into our blood system, but there's no running away from the tiger or no chasing the tiger. And our body just feels that threat mode, and it doesn't have an outlet for it like it would if it were an actual tiger. It just doesn't see the difference between it. It's fear is fear, is the bottom point. And so when life gets overwhelming and you start to get afraid, you start to get buried, your brain starts to prioritize safety over creativity, over anything else. And so taking risks become harder and harder because you're not capable of doing harder risks because your nervous system is trying to protect you. It is saying, look, something is wrong here. Let's just hold off for a minute. And so you're going to have to reduce that threat level, that fear level. And so if you're amping this up in your head with fear and protecting yourself, it's going to be harder for you to get back on track. So try to bring the temperature down inside of yourself. Neuroscientists often call this the amygdala. Oh, I'm saying it wrong, but it's a part of the brain that does like fear and flight. And it is the idea that it's trying to help us be safe in risks. That's the idea, is that it's trying to help us take smart risks. And when we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're not getting enough sleep, when we're over worried about a project or failing at a project, that literally underperforms. And so you're not imagining fear, even if you think it's silly that you should be afraid. Like, I'm building a patio. I'm not chasing tigers. Why am I so afraid of it? But the truth of it is your body just sort of reacts in the wrong way. So at that point, you want to get your courage back. And that means that you're going to sleep more. That is going to help your risk-taking centers of your brain function better when you're rested. You're going to reduce decision load. So you're just going to decide what the next best action was. That's how I did it. Is I said, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through this whole patio and we're going to line up all the bricks and we're going to drop the pins in. Easy peasy. Measured everything, dropped them in the pins. Perfect. Okay, great. Now we finished this. What's the next best step? So then you start, like I said, bringing it down, making it simple. You reconnect with the purpose. Why am I even doing this? Imagine you're looking for a job. You're looking for a new job. You got your resume done. You picked some particular places that you may want to interview, and now you're scared. You're frightened, and this feels like a threat to you. Why are you doing this? Well, I really need, to make more money, or I just want to be happier day in and day out. Reconnect with that, and then practice what they call like exposure in tiny steps. We're only going to do a little bit at a time. We're going to write up our paragraph for the app so that we can apply for this job. And our resume is already going to be done. We did that already. And so now we're going to do a tiny steps, tiny steps, so that we don't trigger those fear centers in our body. And we're going to remind our brain of past wins. Look, I've done this before. I've sent out resumes before. It turned out fine. Every time I've looked for a job, it turned out okay. All we have to do is start, and so you talk yourself up a little bit. And then part of it too is if you have a friend who will be there with you, who'll stand by you and make you feel better. And as soon as you sent out 5 resumes in, whatever app you're using, they'll take you out to lunch, or we'll go have a fun day out, and it'll sort of erase that whole bad taste in there. Courage isn't really a personality trait. It's a state that you can cultivate in yourself. And sometimes people will say, oh, I'm just not very courageous. I'm just not very good at that. The answer is that you are. You just have to start to build it. And then the question is what do you do if you are so scared you're finding it just too hard to begin again or to continue in whatever it is you're doing? You can say, look, I'm restarting this project today, even if it's imperfect. You just declare that. Maybe say it out loud. So if you're working on finding a new job and now you look at your resume and you're like, oh, it's not really good, or gosh, I just don't know what I'm going. Start over. It's okay for you to start over. You're not going to start from scratch. You've already done a considerable amount of work, but let's just go back to basics again. And let's just figure out what it is we can do from the very beginning again. Choose then 7 days to have tiny micro streaks. 7 days where you can have success every day. That's it. Not a forever commitment, not a lifelong commitment, just 7 days. So for 7 days, every day, I'm going to fill out one application for a job, attach my resume, and click send. That little amount of momentum will help you quite a bit. It's short enough so it won't scare your brain. Look, in 7 days, we're going to be done with this little burst right here. Or exercise. For 7 days, I am just going to exercise for 5 minutes. I'm just going to do a little tiny burst, and we're going to get some momentum in this project. That's what we're going to do. And then make the first step. So, like I said, so easy you can't possibly fail. The first step should feel meaningful, but it shouldn't be too big. It shouldn't be. So your first step, it should be very, very small. If it feels meaningful or deep, maybe it's too big. So I talked about you're gonna go to the job application site and you're gonna fill out the paragraph about why you're applying for this job. You'll see the fields that you have to fill in. And so go into like a text editor and write out what it is ahead of time you're going to say. But if it feels momentous, if it feels like, boy, this is a big step, maybe it's too big. So make it a little bit smaller. What could you do? Could I just write up a paragraph about why I want this job? Whatever is the first paragraph in this application. Because momentum will grow in the presence of action. It doesn't grow by rest. Some people say, well, I just need a rest. I just need to take a rest. And if I take a rest, then I'll get my momentum back. That rarely ever happens that way. It actually comes back when you do actions. That's when you get momentum. And so if you can get a small step, if you can get one friend to follow along in your progress with you, it makes you more likely that you're going to finish it. And there's actual research that shows that too. And then normalize fear as part of creativity. Fear is proof that you're doing something meaningful. It's not a sign that you should stop. So if you have fear about what it is you're going to do, I had fears about starting this podcast, and I had fear certainly about bringing it to YouTube because I'm not a video person and I have a face for radio. And, it was hard for me. But you know what? It means that you're onto something. It means you're doing something that's really digging in deep and challenging you. And then the next step is, it's a short story that you can tell that you're doing this project and you're working on this, just like me and my patio. I was exhausted. I was tired. I was losing momentum. But you know what? I persisted in it. I got the patio finished. I was able to do everything that I needed to do. I found workarounds around my half brick problem, and I was able to bring it there. It is a story now. I told myself that I did something insanely hard. It was physical. It was mentally challenging. I had to use geometry for the first time since high school. But you know what? It gave me momentum that I can do something long term, very difficult, physically challenging, and I can get done with it. It's a new story I tell myself. So just remember in the end, you don't lose momentum because you're weak. You lose momentum because you're just a human being. We're all human beings, but human beings restart things all the time. It isn't about recreating an old fire. It's about lighting yourself a new match. Whether your project is something that you need to pick up and start over with, or it's something that you can pick up and continue with, the project isn't over. Your courage isn't gone. Your resources aren't gone. Energy, time. It's just a chapter in between. And the next page starts blank. It's enough room for you to write anything on it. It reminds me of the end of Lord of the Rings, where the ring went into Mordor, and then the next page turns, and we're going to start telling a brand new story. And that's going to be exciting, and that's going to be so helpful to you so that you can do it. All of us, every single one of us, loses our nerve, our energy, our willpower, our momentum when we're working on a project. And it seems like we have to be endlessly brave, endlessly willing to take on new challenges. And so in the end, we got to get our spark back. We got to quiet the voices that are yelling us in our heads. And we have to reduce friction. If you've lost courage, if you feel like you can't do this, if you feel smaller than you used to be, or you feel like, man, I really kind of messed this up, hear this. You are not done. You're not defeated. You're not behind. You're just between chapters. We're about to turn the page and write a brand new page in this book. If you've ever done anything meaningful, you know that it requires rest, recalibration, recommitment, and the moment is now. Maybe now you're quietly turning the page where you decide to begin again. Take that one small step, even if it's tiny, even if it's a micro risk, even if it feels silly, one small breath, and tell yourself, I'm allowed to restart. Momentum is waiting for you, and courage will come as soon as you start moving. Action, taking some kind of action for it. Anyway, I hope you appreciate that. Tell me where you got stuck. Is there something that is tying you up right now? Go ahead and leave me a message right here below. I'd love to hear about what's going on in your life. You can also send me an email at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much and have a great day.